Great, thanks very much, Hans. Thanks everybody, delighted to be here to talk about the SEAI program on one-stop shops. Hans is going to help me by moving the screen along, I believe. So Hans, if you want to move to the next one. So just a little bit about SEAI. We are the National Energy Agency for Ireland. We're looking at moving us all towards a low carbon future. We work with homeowners, businesses, communities, government, and it really is about transforming how we think about, generate and use energy. Thanks, Tom. Next one, please. So why the residential sector? Why such a focus for Ireland on the residential sector? Well, a quarter of all energy used in Ireland is in the residential sector. Also, a quarter of our energy-related CO2 emissions come from the residential sector. Households are the largest consumer of heat energy, and about half of our heat comes from oil and another 20% from gas. So you can see we use quite a lot of fossil fuels in that sector. So next one, please. So what did government decide to do about that? So in their climate action plan, government said, okay, our focus on the residential sector is that we want to upgrade 500,000 of the existing homes to a B2 BER energy rating. That's the EPC. And we want 400,000 of all the homes in Ireland to be, of existing homes, to be heated with heat pumps. And just to put that in context, we've got around 1.7, 1.8 million homes in Ireland that are occupied homes. So that is about 30% to a third of all existing homes to be upgraded to B2, and about a quarter of all existing homes to have heat pumps. So you can see that that is quite an ask, quite a jump for us to do, given where we are right now. And just where we are right now, 50% of all homes in Ireland have a BER rating of D or lower, and a quarter of them have a BER rating of E or lower. Where are we in Ireland now with what we've done? Almost 500,000 homes have been supported in some way by SEAI to do some work with them. However, most of those are light retrofits. A lot of people doing that step-by-step approach themselves, where they've probably done the easier stuff. They've done their attic, or they've done cavity wall insulation, which is kind of lower cost and simpler to do. Thank you, Hans. If we move to the next one. Government, are they serious about this? Very serious. 8 billion euros have been allocated out to 2030 to tackle this area. We reckon from a KPMG report that was done, the cost of doing the level of upgrades we've been talking about could be anywhere up to 28 billion. So government are putting a fair bit of money towards that themselves. Obviously, then they'll be looking at leveraging private finance. I'll talk a little bit on low cost lending for homeowners. And then there is European funding that we also leverage somewhat. You will also see there at the bottom that is our sort of national development plan allocation out to 2030. And you can see we're starting quite small, and you can see between 2022 and 2030, there's a 10-fold increase. So we do know we're on a very steep trajectory here where we're going to have to grow the supply chain and grow the demand. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Thank you, Hans. Next one. So driving demand, very much we have 4 quadrants that we've looked at and said we need to work on. The first one there in the top left is how do you get consumers? How do you activate them? Then on the other side is, well, once you've activated them, how do you help fund them to do what they want to do? On the bottom left there is how do you make sure there's a supply chain there operating that's fit for purpose? And then on the right is, have you got the structures and governance there to encourage both consumers and the supply chain, and to really not get in your own way? How do you make sure that you can achieve this? Thanks, Hans. Next one. And you can just skip on from that one to the graph. So this is the consumer decision-making framework, and it's very much, if you see on the right there, we do an awful lot of research with consumers very regularly. On a yearly 18-month basis, we do a large survey with consumers. We do regular focus groups. We've done design thinking with them, various things. So This is really what we've come up with on the way a consumer operates. So on the left, you've got all the consumers with an energy saving potential. And then you've got how many of them are aware and engaged. And you can see at the top there in a bubble, we've talked about how could you make them aware and engaged? Well, you've got an information campaign, demand generation campaigns, you've got building energy rating. How do you make the advisory report with that better? How do you get more people to get involved with that? You could, for those laggards, put in minimum energy performance standards to encourage them to get aware and engaged. And then you've got, once you've got all those people, you've got to, well, how do you capture the ones that are making the decision? Because there are people making decisions every year. Not everybody is. Maybe once every 10, 15 years, somebody might be moving home or extending their home, or they may have a change in circumstances where somebody retires, or there's an extension to the family, they've had children and they might want to upgrade their home. And you're trying to get them at those trigger points, we call them, when, hey, listen, have you thought about energy efficiency when you're doing that project? Make sure it's wrapped into it. This is the time to do it. You've encouraged that consumer and they've said, okay, I'm willing to go that route. But I don't have the funding for it. So how do you make sure that there's funding available in the market and easily accessible for consumers? And after that, down at that number four, how do you make it attractive? You know, your grants, your way of dealing with consumers, your way of making sure that it's easy and hassle-free for them. And that's where sort of the one-stop shop can come in. And that's where you get to your annual uptake. So really all of that was in our mind in this sort of design thinking framework that we use to come up with the one-stop shop. Thanks, Hans. Next one. Again, looking at consumers and how they think about things and how much they think about energy and where you might place them on the map. If you just take out that little 5% slice at the top where you have consumers who think that they've done everything that they need to do, well, then you've got broadly a third, and that's a third of consumers there on the darker blue on the right who haven't investigated, haven't thought about us really. So what do you do for those? Well, it's all about information and promotional campaigns, making sure that they're aware that it's on their radar. And then down at the bottom there, people who have investigated ways to reduce energy but haven't acted on them. Well, now it's about how do you give them a little bit more information? That's your energy performance certificate, your BER, but it's also, we have come up with a home energy assessment, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Also the one-stop shop, because it helps people act. And then on the bottom left there, you've got people who've already done some work, but there's more that can be done. So who do we think those people are? They're probably people who've worked with us and done one or two smaller measures that they're comfortable doing, that they have the finance themselves for. And now you've got to start to move them along and say, okay, this is a more complex, a more comprehensive project. You're going to need more help. And that's where the one-stop shop comes in, and we'll take over and project manage the whole thing for you. But also you probably need some financing, and that's where the low-cost finance comes in. Thank you. Next one, Hans. Focus groups. We do lots of focus groups with people. And what did we find out before we launched the one-stop shop? We had done a design. We'd listened to consumers, we'd listened to the supply chain, but now we came back to the consumer market again to say, this is what we're thinking about. These are the kind of things we're thinking about. What's your reaction to that? So just on that, on a general level, homeowners are very engaged in sort of climate action and the climate crisis that we have in Ireland. And they agree that they definitely have a level of responsibility for it and need to participate, but they feel that government have to support them and inform them on how to take action. What do I need to do and how can you help me do it? Strong interest from people, but there is a lack of urgency when it comes to undertaking home energy upgrades. You know, people talk a lot about conserving water or separating their waste, but when you say, well, did you think about your walls? Did you think about changing out of your fossil fuel heating system? That's a bigger ask for them, and they really need some help about doing that. Upfront cost is the main barrier. It's all around affordability. And participators definitely talked about higher grants. When we tested them at various grant levels, you could see that trigger point was around 50% of the average cost. That started to spur them into action. That was when they said, oh, okay, now that's really interesting. And now I think that could be a project that I could do. Obviously, they also talk about low cost finance. Many of them say, look, I don't have the money. I could come up with a small amount of the money, but not the sort of level of money you're talking about to do a comprehensive upgrade. So low cost finance, really interesting to them. But they do think about return on investment, which is quite interesting. So you have to think about that with them and explain it to them. The heat pump is a hard one for people because that's a new one. You're asking them to transfer from something they know, even though they don't understand how an oil or a gas boiler works, it's something that you just press a button and they're used to it. It's been around for decades. Now you're talking about this new technology, and it's about explaining what that is to them and saying nothing really changes for you as a householder. You still press a button, or there is a button automatically there with a timer on it to turn on for you, and your heating comes out. And really, that's the big thing for them. On a cost perspective, they've heard, oh, maybe it should only be in new homes. So there is a learning for them to know it can very easily be put and work very well in retrofitted homes. But then the question is from them, well, if I just switch out my gas boiler, maybe that costs 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, but maybe putting in a heat pump could cost 12, 13, 14,000. So they're looking for that cost equivalence on the boiler replacement, and I'll just talk about that in a minute about how we try to tackle that. One-stop shop's really attractive. They love the idea of somebody coming in who was expert, who would project manage everything for them. It'll give them the confidence, take away the hassle. But of course, the question is, yeah, but that sounds like a really great service, but isn't there a cost to it? And what is that cost? So we had to address that as well. So if we just move down to the next one on the supply chain, Hans, you can skip on. So the supply chain, what did we hear from them? Because obviously without them, you don't have a program. So that's the one-stop shops, but it's also the contractors and the product suppliers, all of those. So for them, they talk to us about long-term policy certainty, because the way SEAI operated, other than the step-by-step approach, which homeowners might take themselves, where they might do an attic or a cavity wall, if you were doing a comprehensive upgrade under SEAI schemes, then you would apply to them through one of the contractors, and that you might be part of 100 homes or 50 homes or 20 homes that was part of a larger project. That approval would happen early in the year, and then the project had to be completed by the end of the year because our budgets coming from government were annualized. That was a huge issue for the market, the supply chain, because now you had these peaks and troughs. They had to early in the year tool up, make sure they had all the resources in place, get all the upgrades done over the summer, and as they were coming back into autumn, they would need to complete all the projects and send all the documentation to SEAI so that we could inspect and then pay them their grants. And then there's this lull across the winter when everybody's feeling very cold in their homes and is really thinking about getting upgrades done. So we've pivoted that out, and we're looking at multi-annual funding there now. Also thinking about lots of contractors are in the countryside. They're not all in urban centres. We are very rural economy in Ireland. We only have 4 or 5 large cities, and after that, lots of bigger and smaller towns. So retrofit is about upgrading homes right across the community. So this is quite attractive to them because every community, every county can be activated. And even though a one-stop shop might be sort of the project manager, there will be contractors who will work with those one-stop shops right across the country. Also, it's of interest to the wider construction sector, because right now we do have a need for huge amounts of new housing in Ireland. So we're at that peak of new housing. But if we look back to early 2000s, 2002 to probably 2008, there was a real building boom in Ireland for homes. And then we had the recession, and suddenly everyone in construction was out of work. There was no more new build happening. So there is that peaks and troughs that happen in that market. And the construction sector certainly see retrofit as another strand they could look at, that when we've evened out on the new build, this is a new opportunity for them. So they're certainly looking at that space. We are very conscious also that there is a need for a greater resource chain in the supply side of things. So while you might have lots of plumbers, you don't have a lot of heat pump installers, but really that's a short course that a good plumber can do, and they can now become a heat pump installer. So we have universities, ETBs, we have the Department of Labour, we've got the Department of Education, all working on training people up, apprenticeships, all of those sorts of things, to make sure that that's there for the one-stop shop, so that they have a supply chain to work with them. Next one, please. A little bit on governance and structure. And that really is about how do you design your program. Like I said, historically, what we had was the supply chain would apply to us for a large number of homes. We would make an approval on those. They would upgrade those homes, and they might come back to us after 10 of them were done to do a drawdown on grant funding for those, and then they might wait until the late part of the year and draw down funding again. So they were out there for quite a lot of cash flow until the project was done. In addition, they had quite a lot of documentation to put together for us. We would be looking for invoices, receipts, bank statements, all of this to show the trail of funding. And that was a real turn off, because there's quite a lot of time taken up with that, and quite a lot of, I suppose, a back office administration to all of that, and a cost to it, obviously. So what we tried to do in the design of the one-stop shop is to take away the unnecessary steps and to simplify the process. So a lot of the work with the one-stop shop is done up front. So you have to apply to SEAI to be a one-stop shop. You have to get registered and regulated by us. So there is 2 phases to that. The first phase is where you do a fairly simple application to us, telling us who you are, telling us about your insurances, your IT, your workforce, your division of duties, your quality assurance system, all of that sort of stuff, that you demonstrate that you are of sufficient size, scale and standing to be able to become a one-stop shop. And then for that, we agree with you when you do your phase 2 that you send into us your strategic plan that looks over the next 2 to 3 years and the kind of numbers that you are looking at doing. And we agree in principle with you that those sort of numbers are fine. They fit with our budget lines, and that all things being equal, if you come to us with those homes and upgrade them, then we will fund you for them at the end. On the design, we simplified it out and said, look, for this, you have to meet a B2 energy rating for the home, and you have to at least upgrade the home by 100 kilowatt hours uplift. On the incentive side, we previously had, the grant is 35% of the eligible cost. And of course, an eligible cost for one home is very different than an eligible cost for another. And also homeowners were finding that difficult, because they might come to a contractor and say, well, I see SEAI give 35% of the cost of my upgrade, but you're only telling me it's 25% of the cost. And of course, this is because homeowners add extra things in that aren't necessarily eligible energy efficiency measures. Or for instance, they might look at their windows and say, oh, well, I would like the triple glaze, alu-clad, A-rated, whatever, that costs maybe twice what it costs to get to the rating of a window that we would find acceptable. And we will obviously only pay the 35% of the eligible cost for the acceptable window rather than the extra. So we decided that the best way to deal with that was to move to fixed grants per measure. So fixed grant per measure, what we did is we looked at a detached home, average, semi-detached, terraced, and apartment, and what were the costs of each measure generally for those. And we did about 4 different exercises with our own programs, with programs elsewhere, and also we had quantity surveyors go out and do surveys in the market to find out what costs were. And then we fixed our grants at what is broadly around half of the cost. It's around 50% of the cost. like I say, if you were a larger detached, you might find it was only 40% of the cost for you. If you were a smaller detached, you might be a little bit more than 50%, and that's good for you. But generally about 50% of the cost of the measures. We brought in a new grant that's called a Home Energy Assessment Grant. And this is more than a BER, a Building Energy Rating Assessment, an EPC assessment. It is that, but after that, it's very specific to the home. It is looking at designing the home for a heat pump. How do you reach the proper heat loss indicator? So make the home fabric tight. Do you need any ventilation systems in there? Do you need to look at your floors? It tells you everything that you need to do. It gives you a quote for the costs. It gives you what are the grants from SEAI, and then what is the net cost to the homeowner. So it's very clear to the homeowner what they need to do. We hope to layer on in the future avenues to low cost financing onto that. That hopefully will happen next year. But this is a really useful commodity for the homeowner, because they have that home energy assessment, which they will have gotten from the one-stop shop, but there's nothing to stop them going to another one-stop shop and also getting another quote, just to make sure that they are getting value in the market and they can shop around for that. Also, not all homeowners that get a home energy assessment will be ready to act right then for various reasons. There may be personal reasons, there may be financial reasons, but now they have the Bible, now they have the pathway to upgrade their home. So that's really important to them and will stay with them. And indeed, they may even use it for a step-by-step pathway to upgrading their home, because it does tell you in what order you should do things. We put in bonuses to incentivize certain actions and measures. So this year you'll see we have bonuses for heat pumps, and I'll just flick up the grants in a little while and you can look at those. The grant is discounted to the homeowner. So that means that the one-stop shop quotes the homeowner, and let's just say he takes a quote for a semi-detached house that's going to upgrade from an F to a B2 and it costs 40,000. He will show the cost of each measure for the 40,000 and how it adds up, and then what are the SEAI grants. And let's just say they added up to 20,000. So the net cost to the homeowner is 20,000. And then that homeowner will only be charged that 20,000. They will only be charged the net of grant amount by the one-stop shop. So basically, the one-stop shop waits for SEAI to pay them the grant when the project is finished. So there's that commitment from them. Now, obviously, that means that they have to be able to bankroll that and cash flow themselves for that. There's also the energy credits contribution. So the energy supplier obligation scheme that is in place in Ireland. The one-stop shops will be lined up with energy suppliers, and if there are energy credits or discounts available through those energy suppliers, they will deduct that off the cost to the homeowner as well. Next one, please, there, Hans. So just on the National Home Energy Upgrade Scheme, which is the scheme which is there for one-stop shops to use, just again, fixed grant amounts, sort of around 50%. There is a home energy assessment there. It's grant aided separately, so you don't have to necessarily go ahead with works. It's grant aided on its own. It does provide that pathway to B2 and beyond. We're looking at streamlined delivery models now for registered one-stop shops, a simpler and easier consumer journey that's end-to-end and hassle-free. And for those one-stop shops, they don't now have to give us invoices and receipts anymore. We look at the pre-BER, which is the one they do before the project, and we look at the post-BER, which is done after the project. They're done by independent BER assessors, and we do an online check on those to make sure, hey, listen, the one-stop shop told us this measure was done. We can see, yeah, that the attic insulation was only to that level of a U value before, and now it's to that increased level. So we can see that there was a measure done for attic insulation, for instance. And so it's all very streamlined, and we don't need to, I suppose, drown either ourselves or the one-stop shops in red tape and documentation. Try to make it much more streamlined and simple for them. Next one, please, Hans. So just broad strategy, what was behind our thinking, alignment and building for scalability. We're going to go tenfold in the next 7 years. We needed to build for scale. We need to decarbonize and also increase fabric. Heat pumps are really important, and external wall insulation to make sure that those more difficult homes get wrapped so that they are heat pump ready or other renewable heating system ready. Agility, we absolutely understand we need to be agile. This is our response to the market right now, but we will be keeping an eye on that market. And if things change, then we will change with it very quickly, all the time communicating with the market. Next step is low cost finance to show affordability. So just the one-stop shop service to talk about what is it so that we all understand, because I know in some other countries one-stop shops can mean something different than they mean in Ireland, but it is a complete home energy upgrade solution for homeowners and for landlords. The one-stop shop will carry out multiple home energy upgrades in one go to achieve at least a B2 BER rating. They can go to A if they want, and at least 100 kilowatt hour uplift to the rating. Wide range of grants. The homeowner only pays for the works net of the eligible grant. Like I said, the one-stop shop holds out for the grant back from SEAI when the project is finished. It is a fully managed solution for the homeowner, doing the home energy assessment, organize contractors to come in and do the works, quality assure those works, deal with the grant application with SEAI and payment, and do a follow-up BER and hand it back to the homeowner. The two caveats that are there, that this is only eligible for homes that are built and occupied before 2011, because building energy regulations after that should ensure that a home is pretty energy efficient. Just flick on to the next one there, Hans. So just on the left there is the one-stop shop service for SEAI, and that is the one where we're really pushing to get homeowners to do a complete and comprehensive energy upgrade to get to B2 and beyond. But we aren't throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We are keeping our individual home energy grants there for people who want to or have to individually upgrade measure by measure over time. Now the big difference, I suppose, there on the left is we grant aid the home energy assessment under the one-stop shop. Currently under the individual energy grants, it's not available. And you can see there that on the upgrades that are available, we do give extra grants if you were doing the one-stop shop upgrade to B2 service. So you get a grant for the home energy assessment, you get a grant for project management, you'll get a grant for floor insulation, for windows, and for ventilation. Those are not available on the individual energy upgrade grants. The reason for that is we obviously have a finite budget and we have to put our funding where it's best used. And if somebody's doing a comprehensive upgrade, well then, yes, you would fund windows as part of that comprehensive upgrade. But on an individual energy grant, if somebody is just doing windows, well, that's probably not the best place to be spending your restricted budget. Great, thank you for that. Next one, Hans. Just on the grant amounts there, I'll flick them up quickly, but won't dwell on them too much. You'll see the highlighted ones that I have there, those first two rows and the fourth row. And that's what I talked about, the heat pump, and listening to consumers. They said, yeah, I'll switch to the heat pump if it's broadly equivalent to me fully replacing my fossil fuel system. So we reckon that's somewhere in the 4,000 space. So if you look at that, a semi-detached or a detached home, 6,500 towards a heat pump. If they have to replace their central heating system, so replacing their pipes, their radiators, various things, an extra 2,000 towards that. And right now there is a 2,000 scheme launch bonus for homes that are upgrading to B2 with a heat pump. So essentially that means 10,500 euro towards the cost of a heat pump that probably is broadly in that 12 to 16,000 range for homes, less you'll see for apartments. You'll also see that we just have two other rows there highlighted, the ceiling insulation and the cavity wall insulation. Really, those are responses by government to the current energy emergency. So it's to encourage people to do those low cost measures to reduce their energy bills. So that is equivalent to about 80% of the cost of those measures. So it's a really no-brainer for homeowners who have homes that can do cavity wall, get those pumped, reduce your bills by 30% plus. Okay, next one. Thanks, Hans. So this is just a quick roundup of what we talked about, the issues and solutions. So what we found with consumers were, look, there was a lack of awareness and information. We have a very big demand generation campaign out there. We started with TV, radio, printed media ads. We're now moving down to consumer-based social marketing, moving to local areas, moving to work with our sustainable energy communities, with our local media, partnering up with one-stop shops and local supply chains, make sure that that movement happens at a local level. There is a need for tailored advice. Homeowners were confused, didn't know what to do, or a little bit scared of that big bang project. You were moving into stuff that was a little bit more complex than they were used to. Home energy assessment is there that tells you exactly what you need to do. It's the Bible for what you need to do with your home. Homeowners had hassle, fear, confidence, registered one-stop shops. Come to that one entity, they will do everything for you. They will project management everything for you. There won't be an argument between contractors if something goes wrong saying, oh, it was the windows guy. No, it was the external insulation guy or whatever. Cost and affordability, we've increased our grants coming from about 35% to around 50%. And we are bringing in low cost loans because we still understand that the consumer may not have that other 50%. So they need access to that. For the supply chain, multi-annual government funding was the main issue for them, but also make it easier for us, take away the red tape. We've listened to them. We've tried to remove as much as possible as that while keeping balanced governance, because obviously we are using public funds. So there has to be a governance there. That's it for me.
Excellent. Thank you very much,